And we know you're certainly a soundbite favorite for a lot of the cable news channels and those sort of things. Probably about a week or so ago, you had a quote that was picked up talking about the number for every, I think 10 you said that come across, for every one scholar, or I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but those facts, there's 9 that are muling drugs, essentially paraphrasing, of course. Talk about that quote a little bit, because that's really been vilified, and it was, I know from a fact for the past, you and I had a conversation where they took a soundbite and did that very similar thing when Obama was first running for president. Talk about that quote a little bit and explain what you were talking about there.
Well, this is a typical tactic where they'll lift a quote out of context and turn the meaning of it clear around 180 degrees and write a false headline on it and then send it out. And they started at the lowest level of the liberal blogs, and they try to ratchet that up till it can get into the New York Times and AP. That's the tactic on the part of the left. And so, but it was this, that Dick Durbin, Senator Durbin from Illinois, who visited Iowa last Friday on an Amnesty Act, the Dream Amnesty Act, he has given the speech, they tell me, once a week for 10 years advocating for amnesty for kids that have gone through the system here and got an education in the United States, whose parents brought them into the United States. He would characterize it, many on the other side of this argument would characterize it as, well, the DREAM Act is about valedictorians who were brought here as babies, and now how can we say that they're going to be sent back home to their home country? And so I got to this point where there was no open debate on the full spectrum of who would be legalized under the DREAM Act. What I know is that there had been a tremendous amount of fraud, and you would be legalizing the drug smugglers along with the valedictorians and a lot of people in between. It's about a 2 million people universe that's defined, at least within this bill. And so I just brought them up short, and I said, there's another picture to look at. And I said first, it wasn't part of the quote. I said, yes, there are valedictorians here. They tug at my heartstrings too. But for every valedictorian that you would legalize under the DREAM Act, you will pick up 100 drug smugglers who are carrying marijuana across the desert. And by the way, these are not drug smugglers that are just making one trip across, carrying some drugs in order to earn their passage into the United States. They're going back and forth, and I spent a lot of time on the border with the Border Patrol, or sitting down along the border at night in the dark with illegals coming across me on both sides. I've sat in a ranch house down there and met with Border Patrol agents in civilian clothes, one at a time, in private, as they tell me their narratives. I've flown the border. I've done one strut landings. I have a helicopter on top of lookouts that they have, the spotter locations on mountains where they control the traffic from Mexico through Tucson all the way up to Phoenix, which is smuggled drugs. I've been into much of that. I've traveled all that border with exception of some of the miles along in Texas along the Rio Grande. I know that border, I know the Border Patrol, I know the ICE agents. They support me. They call me and tell me, stick with this, hold your ground on it. But the reason that I put that out was because this discussion is not about valedictorians. There are a handful of them, but there are scores and hundreds of drug smugglers who would apply for legal residence through that path in the United States. And then, what does that give them? That gives them an open path to go back and forth across the border whenever they want. That'll increase and help facilitate drug smuggling. We can't be doing that. We can't destroy the rule of law and open the path up for drug smugglers and then say to me or anybody else, well, you can't say that because it doesn't fit with our agenda to pass the DREAM Amnesty Act.
You bet. You considered a run for the U.S. Senate seat that Tom Harkin is vacating after his term. I know you took some time and some thought into it, and then decided against the run. What were the factors that contributed to you deciding that it wasn't something you wanted to pursue at this time?
Well, it looked like it was an open path to the nomination, and you'd have to live millions of lifetimes to ever see that opportunity again. So it seemed like it was the hand of Providence that opened the path to the nomination. But I need to step back and do this analytically. So we went back and looked at all the pieces. We built the campaign on paper. We understood what it would take, how much money it would take. I believed all along that we could raise that money. And it would take a lot of my time to be spend almost all of my time in Iowa and not in Washington. I can envision myself stepping out onto the floor of the United States Senate to take the oath of office in January of 2015. But I thought about that, and I thought about all of these things that are coming through: Farm Bill, the immigration issue, the overspending and needing a balanced budget amendment out of the House, amendment to the Constitution out of the House. I thought about those things, and I thought, what doesn't get done if I'm home campaigning instead of in Washington pushing my job? And how do I put the genie back in the bottle if bad things happen on my watch while I've turned my back to campaign for the Senate? And in the end, I couldn't get to yes. It had to be a decision first of the head, the analytical part of the head. Then it needed to be a decision of the gut, and that's that instinct component. And then it needed to be a decision of the heart, and that's the faith component. Those things didn't line up because in the end it became about me rather than about service. And I'd caution people, when you have opportunities in life, when you're creating opportunities in life, and we should do those things, stop and check that. Check it. Does my analytical brain say this is right? Do my guts also conform with that? And does the faith component, does your heart also conform? If they don't line up, then you should maybe look at doing something different. And so I came to a comfortable decision. It took me about a week to get settled with it, even after I made it. But I look back on this now, it was the right thing. I'm doing my job with the vigor and gusto that I've always wanted to do, and I'm not distracted by a political campaign. I can serve Iowans and serve Americans.
One other question, you kind of brought up the Farm Bill. Where are we at, and where do you stand on the versions that are out there that you're looking at right now?
Well, my first point is I want to get a 5-year farm bill passed and signed into law so that at least there's some predictability in policy for our ag producers. That's been a central priority. We separated the bill, the nutrition from the ag side of it, and so 80% of the resources to the nutrition side are set off to the side, the 20% of the resources that are ag, and pass that off the floor. I didn't agree that was the best strategy. I thought there was a better strategy. Nonetheless, that helps move the ag side of this thing down. Next thing is that I've been working, and we've had meetings once a week to put together the strategy for the nutrition side, and we've come to essentially an agreement among the House Republican leadership. They've got to go now and count the votes to be able to pass a nutrition bill, and that should happen. If they get it right, it's going to happen the second week in September. That lets us then go to conference and try to get a bill done before the 30th of September. I think it's going to be hard to accomplish it in that period of time, but if we're close, we can do a short-term extension.
Okay. Somebody came out recently, polled numbers, and then a comment was made that Congress is less favorable than a cockroach right now, was the definition and approval percentage. Do you agree with that? And if so, what's the problem that the American public has such a low vision of our elected leaders?
Well, I've seen these polls for a long time, and I remember the low popularity of Nancy Pelosi when she was the Speaker of the House. It went down to something like 8% support. I don't know what these numbers might be, but they've always proven to be in recent history, they've proven to be that public is critical of Congress as a whole, but they're generally supportive of their member. And so, I don't know, or maybe it's just that cockroaches have gotten popular for some reason.
So, Congressman, I appreciate you joining us today and visiting a little bit about what's going on in Washington, and always welcome you back here to Northwest Iowa.
Glad to be back. Thank you, Randy.